All right. Seems like we're getting up to a pretty good number here, over 130 of you so far, and we anticipate some more hopping on as the call gets underway. But in an effort to get through what we want to get through in an hour and hopefully get a chance at the end to answer a ton of questions, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get things started. First of all, I actually see a great question in the Q&A right away that I'm going to go ahead and answer live right now. This session is going to be recorded. We're going to put it on our YouTube channel. We will email it out not only to all of you who are here, but also all those who have registered for this webinar. So don't fret if you have to drop off early for whatever reason. No worries, you'll be able to catch the rest of the content. So just be aware of that. And then a couple quick housekeeping items. Number one, this is a webinar technically. So what that means, please keep yourself muted and keep your video off. If you need to come off mute, I can invite you to do that at the end of the meeting. But until then, please stay muted. If you have questions, there are a couple places that you can go with those. The Q&A is a really good option. You should see a little button for that on the bottom of your screen. And then you should also be able to chat directly to meeting hosts as well. So if you come up with any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. We may or may not answer some of them along the way. Odds are the question that you're going to ask is going to get covered further on in the talk. Um, However, we are limited to an hour, so we can only talk about so many things. So the session we did on the European timeline this morning, we did about 40 minutes of presentation and about 20 minutes of questions, and we had many questions unanswered. We could talk about this stuff for a full day, and we wouldn't run out of questions to ask. So bear with me. If we don't get to your question, we'll do your best to get you a follow-up after the meeting to make sure that you have an answer. All right, so let's go ahead and get into things then. First, a little introduction on myself. I definitely, looking through the names in the participant list, I think there are a lot of you who I know, names that I recognize from either my own sailing or running events. Uh, Whatever that may be. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Doug Wake. I am the Race Sense Director here at Vakaros, which basically means that any and all things race sense, whether that's training new operators, running events, onboarding classes and clubs, all that is sort of what I do, along with a lot of traveling to regattas where I get to meet a ton of sailors just like you all. I am an Atlas expert. I sail pretty frequently. I own a Melgus 15 that I race with my girlfriend. And I grew up sailing Lightnings and Etchels. So I've been around the block and quite a few fleets, and now I'm getting to use race sense a little more as a sailor after a couple of years really only using it as an operator. So there is some info that we'll talk about here that is race sense specific, but the vast majority we're actually focusing on just the Atlas more broadly and not necessarily being race sense specific. We spend a lot of time these days talking about race sense, and so we want to make sure that we can give tips that are really applicable to everyone, whether they're racing, cruising, using race sense, or not. So, anyways, we will go ahead and get straight into things then. And I want to start with just a brief overview of a few important terms and features of the Atlas 2. And the Atlas Edge is effectively the same form factor. So I just want to walk you guys through a few things. Looking at this menu right here, I want to tell you what each of these things are. First of all, widgets. So when I talk about a widget is any of these boxes on this screen that gets filled in with a piece of data. So that's a heading widget that I just boxed around there. In the bottom left here, we've got a heel angle widget. So when I'm talking about widgets, right, if we're setting up pages and we're choosing a widget, that's basically a piece of data that I'm slotting into one of these little boxes on a page. So that's super important to be aware of. We also have our buttons on our Atlas, and our buttons are over here. And then we also have a page button down here. Now, many of you are Atlas owners, but I know I saw quite a few in the registration list who were not so familiar with the Atlas. So these buttons are where you go to control your Atlas. One of the cool things about them is that they are configurable. You can determine which buttons you have on the side of your screen. You can switch them out page by page, but be aware that these are the buttons and they each have a label. And then we also have a wide variety of sensors inside the Atlas. We have a magnetometer, which is what most people would call a compass, right? We have a GPS chip, which allows us to derive metrics like course over ground, speed over ground, and do all the cool starting stuff that we do, both with and without race sense. Um, and we also have an IMU that not only factors into our heading and positioning calculations, but also lets us show heel and trim angle with the boat. So that's important stuff. The only other thing to be aware of, if you're not familiar with the Atlas, is the LED bar up top here. You can see it's lit up pink in this render. Um, that's a super bright LED bar that you can use to show quite a few things. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just be aware when we're talking about the LEDs or the lights, that is up here, actually just above the screen. All right. So we've got our four tips, and this is probably the most important of them all. One of the cool things about the Atlas, and I know that many of you are aware of this, is that it is really a highly customizable instrument. But you need an avenue to actually go and customize the instrument. So what is that avenue? It's the Vakaros Connect app. So with Vakaros Connect, you're able to customize the display of your device, the dampening settings, uh, what LED modes you might be using, or different training modes. You can slot in and slot out different data fields. Uh, Most users, when they get the device, they set it up, they stick with the default profile, and they go sailing. And really, where the folks that are getting the most out of their Atlas on the water are gaining is they're going into Connect and they're making sure that their settings are updated for their given boat, their given venue, whatever that may be. And we'll get a little more into that bit later. So, the first thing that you all should be aware of in Vakaros Connect is what's called a boat profile. Oh, are we getting an echo? If someone's hearing an echo, feel free to pop another note into the Q&A if that's the case. We had pretty good audio this morning, but if there is an echo, please let me know and I'll change my audio setup. Um, if I don't hear anything, I'm just going to carry on. With the boat profile, you can have any number of boat profiles in the Vakaros Connect app. There is a chat. There is an echo. Let me try tweaking something really quick here, guys. All right, let's see if that improves things at all. I'm not certain that it will, but we're going to give it a run. Thank you, everybody, for letting me know. Oh, well, I'm hearing from some people now that there isn't an echo. Oh, well. Anyways, carrying on. With the boat profiles are super useful and they're a really important part of our infrastructure at Vakaros. When you're using a boat profile, better before, no echo. Hold on. That's what I thought. Better previously. All right, let's see if that works a little better then. All right, we're going to go back to the way that we were. For anybody asking, everybody is muted. Right now, I hit mute all participants, so somebody may have been unmuting themselves. But anyways, all right, we're going to carry on. We're going to hang on just like this. Sorry, guys. Getting back to the beginning of boat profiles. So boat profiles are useful for a few reasons with your device. I'm imagining that a large number of you actually sail on multiple different boats. Um, when you're sailing on different boats or in different venues, or even just day to day, you might want different settings and you might want different groups of settings per boat. So by using boat profiles, you can actually have multiple profiles with different ranges of settings that you can then easily switch between. So what you're seeing over here on the right side of the page is actually a screenshot of my Vakaros Connect app. And I sail a range of boats, so you can see I have a range of boat profiles here. At the top, I have one for our Lightning, done some Melgus 19 sailing, Etchells, Melgus 15. And I have different settings for each of those boats, and I'll tweak the display, I'll tweak the dampening, whatever it may be. I can always make those sorts of changes and then easily switch from one profile to another. Another important note with boat profiles is that they're actually how you determine and switch in and out of class compliant modes, which is not relevant for all classes. If you sail J70s or Melgus 24s, pretty much everything's allowed. But if you're sailing in a class like the Snipe or the Thistle, or in many cases the Lightning, um, quite a few bits of functionality are actually not allowed by the class rules. And so we use class compliant profiles to ensure that the device is locked down so that you can use the same device in a legal way to race in those regattas. So if you click into a boat profile, you're going to see a screen that looks like this. You can see a little bit of boat info that you input when you create the profile, and that includes the class of the boat, whether the profile is class compliant, and if it is, you can click on this little blue section right here, and you can actually see what features are allowed in that class compliant profile. It's going to give you the length of the boat, sail number of the boat, and then it's going to list down here any devices that are linked to the boat. Now, in the most case, and for most of you all, that's just going to be one atlas and probably nothing else. That's because you're generally sailing on small one design boats. You probably only have one device. You probably don't have external sensors. But if you were sailing on a boat where, for example, you have two atlases, you would add both of them to that boat profile. And if you're using any external sensors, say a DST-810 transducer, or you're using a wind sensor or a load cell, whatever it may be, you would also add those to a specific boat profile and you would see them listed under this Atlas 2 here. You can also see some racing controls down here for the start timer and the start line. This is where you input your preferred default starting timer length. And under the start line, that's where you would input a manual bow offset if you're manually pinging and you're not sailing in race sense. So if we click into that device, if we click right here on where it says Doug Primary A2, we can actually click in and see a device's data. So what that shows us is a few things, and we're going to sort of walk down this list. And I think that these are generally important for users to know. It can help if you're troubleshooting. It can help to make sure that you have your device set up properly. So what you're going to see at the top, first of all, under info here, are these two, I'm going to get my annotation out right quick, these two little icons, and we have a green icon here. That's a little refresh icon, and that shows that your profile is synced. The latest changes that you've made on Vakaros Connect have been synchronized to your device. And then we also have this blue Bluetooth icon that indicates that your device is connected to your Vakaros Connect app at that time. Now, one important thing to know, especially for folks who are less familiar with Vakaros devices here, is that an Atlas is not like a set of Bluetooth headphones where you actually have to go into your phone setting menus and pair it. An Atlas is actually going to connect automatically as long as it's linked to that Vakaros Connect profile, as long as it's on and the app are open in close proximity to each other. So what else will you see? You'll see your device name, the device serial number. You'll see the model of the device, whether it's an Atlas 2 or an Atlas Edge or an Atlas Halo RTK. You'll also see your RaceSense Pass status. So this is a relatively new update. If you're sailing in RaceSense events, you need to have a RaceSense Pass, either a monthly or an annual pass. This will tell you if your RaceSense Pass is active or inactive, and it'll also tell you the date that it expires. So if you ever need to check on that, this is the place to go. You can also see the boat name, profile name, class compliance, like we talked about before, the firmware version, the GPS version, and then your status indicates whether your device firmware is up to date or whether there's another update available. If you scroll a little further, here's where you really get to the gold mine of Vakaros Connect, where you have all these different data channels that you can actually go in and customize. Everything from the display layout, which we'll talk about next, changing what your screens look like, to your backlight, your LED brightness, the sound levels on your device. You can change the dampening on your heading, your GPS, your heel and trim angle, all that sort of stuff. So there's absolutely tons of stuff that you can come into this menu and update. So we're going to walk through a little bit of that just to make sure that everybody's familiar with how you can customize your displays and your devices. So if you click under display layout, which we just looked at over there, this display layout button up here, you can actually come into a page that looks like this. You're going to see a number. Let me grab my annotation tool again. We're going to see a number of pages on the bottom here that you'll recognize as the pages that actually show up when you're using your device. So if I turn my device on, I can page through and I can see these pages. This device is actually on the profile that I'm showing on the screen here. When I'm in there, I can do a number of things. I can switch out different widgets. If I want to remove one and input another, I can do that. I can add new pages. I can change LEDs. So we're going to walk through a little bit of that. So first of all, I want to show you guys, if you tap this little settings icon in the top right here, you're going to open a menu that you see in this second dropdown. First of all, you can see there are a lot of things that you can do. At the bottom, we're going to start there. You can always delete a page if you want to. I'm a big advocate that if you find the pages that you like, delete the pages that you don't actually feel like you need to see on the water. It'll lower any risk of you getting stuck, um, getting stuck on a page when you're out there. After that, you can also configure your page. You can configure your buttons so you can determine which button labels actually show up on the side and what those buttons do. That includes you can have a line button, an angle button, a start button, a +1 minute button. You can go in and you can actually configure those. You can configure what your LEDs show. LEDs can be configured to show all sorts of cool stuff, including shift tracking, time to line or time to burn. They can also do start time. So your LEDs are, I think, an often underutilized tool on the device. It's a super easy way to see data. Your brain's really good at processing color, and especially for people that struggle a little more with processing numbers quickly, having that data indicated by colored LEDs on top of the device can be a really, really powerful option. And then you can also configure training modes. And the training mode that we offer is called tack and jibe loss. This is something, again, that I really only encourage when you're training. But what we can actually do is go out, you can set some reference angles, and your device can tell you how good your tacks are, how many meters you lost, VMG wise, and then it'll actually rank them against all of your other tacks that day. It's a pretty cool feature. All right. And then other things that you can do, you can actually replace widgets. So if I were to click right over here, if I were to click on this 249 number, I can actually pull up a wide range of widgets that I can see on the far right phone here that I can slot in. And this is the case with any of these widgets on these layouts. You can actually click on the widget, click change widget, and then you could go ahead and slot in a different widget. So say that I felt like I was sailing in a venue and my Atlas couldn't be mounted in a fixed orientation to the boat, right? I'm carrying it around or it's on a rotating mast. So my magnetic heading isn't useful. What I can do is I can click on magnetic heading over here, open this new menu of widgets that are available, and I can select, for example, course over ground. And it will actually slot that widget right into that page instead of the one that I've removed. So super cool option. Same thing if you're going sailing and you decide, hey, I really like this screen, except I decided that I really don't find trim that useful. I don't really have the option to move fore and aft. I'm sailing a 2.4 meter and I'm locked in place. If that's the case, again, you can go ahead, you can tap on trim, and you can select a new widget from this widget menu to slot in. And there's a wide range of widgets, everything that you can see on the screen, plus more. In some classes, you can run a VMG widget, you can run a max speed widget, you can run heel, trim, distance to line, time to line, all sorts of stuff. So I encourage you all to take some time, play around with your options, and maybe occasionally switch up those screen layouts to see if there's something you like more. You can also add pages. So in order to add a page, I'm going to give you a little circle down here. You can see these plus buttons between the pages that I just circled in the bottom left of the page. If you hit that, you're going to see this menu that I've got here in the middle phone, and that's going to allow you to select a layout, but that layout is then going to be added to your page carousel empty. And you can actually select each of the boxes within, you can add a widget, and then you can go ahead and set up an entirely custom page. So a lot of times this is how great sailors will like to approach things. They say, okay, we really want to come at this from an entirely different angle. We just want to start fresh, create our own page, and put in the widgets that just we want. So pretty cool options that you can use to actually customize this display layout. I think one of the things that I would encourage folks to consider is that when you're going out and you're going sailing, setting up your device is something that you should treat like getting a new suit of sails or a new rig on a boat. And what I mean by that is when you get a new suit of sails, or if you change, say I change from North to Doyle sails, things are going to be different. If I change from one mast to another, it's going to set up a little bit differently. Same if I go from one hull to another. And a lot of times that requires us to go out and spend time learning the characteristics of that new piece of equipment. I think an instrument should be treated the exact same way. So what I mean by that is it's really positive to go out with your instrument, do some testing, and figure out what you like in terms of these pages. Get on the water, spend some time, see if you find everything that's on your screen valuable. If you don't, you have a few options, a few places that you can turn. One, you can slot other bits of data in where that original data might have been. If I'm sailing and I say, the trim angle to me is just not useful. I never looked at it. We didn't talk about it once all day. It really didn't matter. I might say, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just going to eliminate the trim angle and I'm going to replace it with course over ground because I think that that's something that I would get a little more utility out of. And then you sail with course over ground and you say, well, never mind. I don't like course over ground either. I never looked at that. Then you might consider going to a layout that only has 3 widgets instead of 4, so everything can get a little bit bigger and easier to see. The moral of the story and what I'm getting at here is that I really encourage you, whether you've had your atlas just for a little time or for a lot of time, to go through an iterative process where you actually input different widgets and see which ones you find valuable. So many people just sail with the atlas out of the box, and to be honest, I sail with pretty much out of the box settings on my atlas. With that in mind, I have tweaked some things, and they're little changes, but it makes a difference to me on the water. But even condition by condition or venue by venue, you may want to go through and make these changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I did see a Q&A come in about cog versus heading and the differences. I can quickly address that here actually while we're sort of talking about setting up different widgets. So cog is course over ground, and that's a GPS derived metric. So let me see, answer live. Uh, Course over ground is GPS derived. So if you're getting offset 10 degrees by current, that's going to be reflected in your course over ground. Heading, HDG, is actually magnetic. So that's the actual direction that the boat is pointing. If you are pointing at 0 degrees and drifting directly backwards, your heading is going to be 0 and your course over ground is going to be 180. So be aware of that. It's important to know that the Atlas does actually have a magnetometer inside of it. I think that's a common misconception. And when we're talking about race sense, that's really, really important, and that we actually use the magnetic heading, which indicates the true orientation of the boat, to make OCS calls and whatnot. So, David, I hope that answers your question. All right. On to dampening. So this, I think, is a really, really important adjustment that you can make on your devices. And I did see a question come in earlier, I think from Bob Shapiro, who asked, I want my compass to be a little more respondent, something like that. I want it to move a little bit faster. That is achieved through the dampening on the device. So if we go into our boat profile and we select our device, we scroll down to data channels, which I've circled here in the big orange. You can see we have magnetic heading, GPS, IMU, VMG. Magnetic heading is probably the most important one that you're going to want to update your dampening on. So if you hop into magnetic heading, you will see a screen like we have over here on the right. First thing we can toggle is between true and magnetic degrees. I always recommend, if you're doing like buoy racing, you pretty much always are going to want to be in magnetic degrees. The reason that you're going to want to be in magnetic degrees is that that is generally what the race committee is going to be using. They're going to be using a hockey puck to look up the course. They're not going to be doing the math to correct for local magnetic declination. Or if they are, they're really trying very hard, and good for them. But anyways, I generally try to have my device set up in magnetic degrees. You can tell on the water if your device is set for magnetic. There will be a little M by any heading icon. When that's happening, you'll have what the actual magnetometer is reading, not corrected for declination. Anyways, getting back to dampening, you have this little slider here that you can move for dampening. And we can get from all the way weak or completely off to all the way strong. And so an important clarification is that with dampening, the weaker the dampening, the twitchier or the faster the compass is going to move, right? We're applying a shorter averaging period. The stronger the dampening, the more we slide that little slider over to the right, the slower the compass is going to move. So when might you want to use each? say that you are sailing on an inland lake. You're sailing in a venue that has super quick shifts, big giant phases, and you want your compass to be updating like that. There's no waves that are really throwing you around or pushing your bow up and down. That's when you might want to have your dampening super weak. If you're sailing in a venue, say we're sailing in Fort Lauderdale and it's super wavy, we've got a big front coming through, and we're sailing Melgus 24s, and our bows are coming up and down massively, just going over the waves. But that's not necessarily indicating the wind shift. It's just that we have to sort of steer up and down to get through the waves. If that is the case, um, you might want to have a little stronger dampening. Having stronger dampening will slow that reading down. It'll make excuse me, excuse me. It will make the number a little more stable, not quite as distracting with the number flicking up and down as you're going up and down those waves. So I really would recommend a little stronger dampening if you're in those wavier, big water venues, maybe with a little more consistent breeze. And this is something that most teams, professional teams are actually changing as they go venue to venue. Um, again, it's another setting, no different than you might set the rig up differently in waves or flat water. You may tune, I think is a good word for it. You may tune your instrument differently in those sorts of conditions. All right. Oops, got to turn my annotation off before we scroll along here. One other item that you can tweak is your orientation offsets. So with orientation, that's actually correcting for how the device is mounted. So if your device is mounted pitched forward or pitched back or heeling side to side, you can actually zero that out. And that's not only going to help so that your numbers are zeroed and easier to keep track of on the water, it's also actually going to help slightly with your orientation um, as you're sailing. And you always want your compass to be perfectly accurate. You will actually help in having a more accurate compass, especially as you're going through waves, if your orientation numbers are zeroed out. So the trick to do that, I like to mount the device on the boat, put the boat in the water, let it float naturally. Once the boat is floating naturally, you can enter this orientation menu in Vakaros Connect. And then I will hit this little button at the bottom that says use current roll and pitch. And that will zero everything out. After that, I'll save and let the device restart. And then everything will be zeroed out so that I know that when the boat is sitting, I don't know, pure as it's supposed to be with nobody on it, everything's reading zero. And so that you know when your boat is actually presenting itself at a given angle. All right. And that takes us into tip number 2. And this is a really important one. I should probably get rid of that giant box that I drew on the screen. We go to a lot of events these days. I certainly do with Race Sense. There is a huge demand on the performance of these Atlas devices, and we really stretch them absolutely to the limit. Um, when you demand the absolute most accuracy in terms of positioning and heading out of a device, it really needs to be mounted properly. And the single thing that causes the highest degradation of performance in these devices is devices being mounted poorly. So when you're mounting devices poorly, you're leaving your magnetometer susceptible to being spoofed effectively by Ferris devices around it. You may hurt positioning if you're in a race sense network. You may actually negatively impact your ability to connect to the mesh network with other boats. So there's a lot to be considered there. So what will hurt device performance? These are just a few of the things that may negatively impact your device performance. The first is carbon fiber. Um, Carbon fiber instrument brackets are the bane of my existence. They used to be total standard and totally cool back when we all had a Tactic Micro. Um, Unfortunately, now that we have instruments that have GPS antennas, carbon fiber brackets are going to provide a decrease in performance for these devices, even more so when they're in a race sets network. Carbon fiber is conductive. You're going to find that you're not going to get as good of positioning. You're not going to get as reliable of communications in a race sense network. Um, Even a carbon plate bracket that you may be mounted up against is going to cause issues. We'll look at some pictures of that later. Even worse, there are some folks that still make brackets that are carbon that wrap around the instrument. That's almost like putting your instrument in a Faraday cage, and you can't expect it to perform. And this is not just the case for Vakaros instruments. This is the case for any small mass-mounted instrument that has a GPS in it. If you're mounting it directly on carbon fiber, you are going to see some performance impact. It may be big, it may be small, but there's going to be some performance impact. All right. Metal also can be a problem. Um, Our general rule is that we want to keep metal and carbon away from any brackets that we're using to mount these devices. If there's, metal fasteners, we can generally cope with that. But like large scale metal brackets are not going to be a positive. Ferrous components can really cause issues. If you have anything magnetic around the device, as you can imagine, we have a super sensitive magnetometer. If you decide to mount a cam cleat to your instrument bracket and you use a magnetized nut and bolt, that's going to significantly impact your heading. We actually had a team just last week who was out at the Etchells Worlds in San Diego, and they gave me a call and they said, "Hey, our compass heading is off like 20 degrees. This is really bizarre." And we had them calibrate their compass, go through all the steps, and it turns out that they just mounted a cam cleat about a half an inch from the device. That will negatively impact the magnetometer performance on your device, and it will make everything less accurate. It then becomes something that you cannot uh, keep close track of. Your device comes, I actually just saw a question come in, so it's worth answering while we're thinking about it. Um, your device comes with a little black cradle, we call it, a black bracket. Um, that's an acceptable bracket. Everything there is non-ferrous. Um, it's plastic, so that's a positive bracket to use. And then I also just saw another question come in from Laura here. Is non-ferrous metal okay? It is okay, but it's not optimal. It still certainly will not help with GPS performance. So even if you have an aluminum mast, we'll talk a little bit more about this soon, but your goal should be to offset the device some from a mast, whether that mast is aluminum or carbon fiber, or really anything else. All right. And then anything inhibiting sky view. This is significantly less common, but if you are in a case where you have a boat with a bimini with a bunch of, metal framing inside of it, you're going to want to avoid mounting your Atlas under that. Again, it will decrease the positioning performance. So optimal mounts, this is probably the most important conversation here. Optimal mounts are generally going to be plastic, excuse me, and non-conductive. So 3D printing is a great option for brackets. Uh, why is that? One, it can be easily customized to go on any given mast. It's pretty easy to get a profile of a mast, print a bracket, and put it on. Um, Plastic is not conductive. It's not going to cause any radio frequency issues when you're mounting or using your device. So we really encourage that. Separation from a spar, if your device is mass mounted, is a really good thing. And then we want to make sure that the device is as free of magnetic interference as possible. So I have a few good examples here. We can see a really nice example here on a thistle. And on this thistle, we can see we have a 3D printed bracket, and we also have our stock bracket that comes in the box that's attached to it. We've got some nice separation from the mast, good clear sky view. So that's a really nice mounting solution there. We can also see on the snipe over on the right here, the device is mounted forward of the mast on the splash rail, but again, it has great sky view, no carbon fiber, none of that. So that's really positive. Just a quick note. We have quite a few questions coming in the chat. We're going through them all in the Q&A. So if you've posed a question in the chat and we haven't gotten to it, it's much easier to answer in the Q&A. So feel free to pop them over there, and we're getting to all those questions as quickly as we can. Just helping out our admin team on the side here. All right. And then a few bad examples of mounting. This one on the left is pretty terrible. So if you look over here, we can see a couple things that are wrong. What can we see that's wrong? One, the Atlas is mounted under another instrument, which not only makes it for an impaired sky view, but also that instrument may be built with ferrous components such that it's throwing off the magnetometer on the Atlas. That's also a carbon bracket. And we can see on this side here, we have the Atlas on top, which is better. But again, it's just pressed up against this carbon fiber plate, which is really not going to help anything. So for these teams, again, even if they're running with another instrument, you always want to have the Atlas on top, and you want to ensure that you have a plastic or non-conductive bracket that you're putting together. I do see a few questions coming in. Let me just go through them really, really quick because I see a couple that are relevant to mounting before we move on. Why is it not letting me scroll up? Give me just a half second. Uh, Someone asked, how far from the mast? I generally look for just like an inch or two of space from the mast. It doesn't have to be super far. We just don't want to be pressed up right against it. So that little bit of space that you can have between the device and the mast is going to be enough. We also got some asks about sources for mounts. Um, you're always welcome to make your own if you have a 3D printer and you want to go out and get into a project. We have quite a few accessories on Vakaros.com and a wide range of mounts. So there are some great 3D printed options there that you can go ahead and purchase through us. And then we also have a close partner company called Mad Mounts. And so if there's a mount that you cannot find on our website, Mad Mounts actually does custom brackets, no design fees. So if you have a boat that has a tricky mounting solution and you don't see something on our website, they're a great option to pick up a bracket. All right. Number 3, pre-race check-ins. And I got to pick up my pace a little or we're going to run out of time here. Pre-race check-ins. There's quite a bit that you can actually do on your Atlas pre-race that I think a lot of people miss. So to talk through that, you have this line button on your device as long as you've configured it. If you have an Atlas 2, you have a line button up here. It's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. So if you hit that line button, oh, wrong way. If you hit that line button, you're going to see a number of things. First of all, you're going to see a line square to value, and that's right up at the top here. The line square to value is the 90-degree angle to where the start line is set. So if your start line is set such that you sail 180 degrees when you're sailing from the pin to the boat, that line square to value is going to be 90 degrees. It also gives you a line length. And then if you sailed reference angles, you can also see line bias and bias advantage. So which end is favored and how much that end is favored by. This is if you generally ping or, excuse me, this is if you ping yourself or if you're in a race sense network. So one of my favorite tricks when I'm out there, and I think this is a really powerful move, is when you're out there, if you hit that line button and you see your line square to value, you can take a wind shot and you can see if you are pointing left or right of that wind shot. And that will actually tell you which end of the line is favored. So this is a really important one. I do it constantly when I'm sailing. I know tons of teams are using this feature. We did a webinar last summer with Steve Hunt and Morgan Trubovich, two of the best pro sailors out there. They use it super frequently. So if you go to the line button, you take your wind shot, and you actually have a compass readout in the bottom left of that line screen, right down here. And you compare that number and your line square to value. In theory, if the line is set perfectly square to the wind, those two numbers will match. However, if the wind is to the left of the line and the pin is favored, your heading, your compass number, is going to be less than your line square to number. So in this example here, we can see my guy's pointing off to the course left. His heading is 350 and the line square to is 0. So we know the line is 10 degrees pin favored. Also, if you're over to the other side, if the heading is greater than the line square to, then the boat end is favored. Really important check. I did see a question come in from Joe here that I just want to clarify. In order to see the bias that we saw on this page, you do have to sail the reference angles. That's not something that populates automatically. So if you go ahead on your home screen, you hit your angle button, hit auto, and it'll walk you through sailing 30 seconds on one tack, then 30 seconds on another. That will then use those calculated reference angles to determine the bias on the line. All right. So this is my rule. I just said it, but I want to say it again. If the heading is less than line square 2, the left end of the line is favored. Less and left. If it's the opposite, then the right end of the line is going to be favored. All right. And then a fourth tip here. This has become a popular one as of late. I mentioned it in a webinar with one of our partners in Melgus and got about 1 million questions at the next Melgus 15 event I went to about setting up distance to line in tenths of a meter. Um, not everybody or every boat demands having distance to line in tenths of a meter, but when you're really getting close and up there, you can actually set the device up so that you can see not only whole meters. Right now, out of the box, the device will show you 5 meters, 4 meters, 3, 2, 1, 0, -1. You can actually set that value up so that you can see it with a tenth of a meter. So if you're playing in those really small margins, you can do a little bit better. The one caveat that I will offer before I get into this is that it's only available in the 40 mm widget size, which is the big widget. So if I put this up here, this is the 40 mm size widget where you can actually only see 2 widgets on the screen. So to configure distance to line with tenths, I'm going to walk you through the process really quick. We're going to enter our boat profile and select our device, and then we're going to hit display layout. Once we hit display layout, we're going to head to a page with the 2 40 mm widgets, or you can create a new page by hitting that plus button to set up a page with just the 2 40 mm widgets. You're going to click the box and you're going to click change widget. When you change widget, you're going to select distance to line. Now, initially, this is not going to have tenths of a meter. You're just going to select distance to line, and it's going to input that into that page that you've either created or are modifying. Once you're there, you'll tap on that distance to line widget that you've put in, and you're going to see widget settings show up as an option down here. It's got this little gear icon. We can click on that. And then once we're into the widget settings, we can actually switch this toggle on to show DTL with tenths. So you can see when it's on, it's going to show up orange down here. And you're going to see a distance to line readout with tenths of a meter show up in your preview here. Once you've done that, you can back out, you can hit save. Your device needs to be on and in range of your phone, and it will restart to synchronize that change. And then I always just like to double check that I can page through and make sure that those changes actually made it to my device. Super cool feature. I think it's really positive to be able to sail with distance to line intents, especially in boats, like I race the Melgus 15. You really have a lot of control over where the bow is late in the sequence. It's not like a TP52 where you sort of wound up and you're going to be good or you're going to be bad. So I think that especially in these smaller boats where you're dancing around the line, it makes a good bit of sense to have the distance to line with tenths turn on. All right. With that, that concludes the planned portion. Took a couple minutes longer than we did this morning, but I want to take some time to go through some questions that I have seen come in. Going to start at the top. Time to burn LED threshold explanation and recommendation from Alistair. So let's roll way back to our display layout. So one thing that you can configure with your display layout is you can actually configure the LEDs for any given screen. And one thing that you can show with LEDs is time to burn. So time to burn is your device is calculating how long it's going to take you to get to the line and how much time is left to the start and the difference between those two. So if you're early, if you could sail and cross the line before go, you have positive time to burn. If you're late, you have negative time to burn, right? You can't get to the line in time. I think, Alistair, to answer your question, and this is probably going to be a difficult answer to hear, it really depends on the type of boat that you're sailing, how you want to set up that type of threshold. If you're sailing in a J105 that takes a long time to get up to speed, you might want to have that be a little higher. You're shooting at a little bit wider of a target versus something like a Melgus 15 where it's a little easier to just like place your bow onto the start line. I think that again, like anything, what I would recommend, because I never want to give a single answer for this, go out, spend some time practicing and working with different setups and see what you're happy with. Just because, different teams have different ways and know their boats far better than I do. So I think it's worth spending some time trying to figure out how to set that up. All right, we have a question here from Dennis. How do you set the pin and boat ends? I go all the way back to my line screen. So if you look at the line screen here on the right side, we have boat and pin. If you are not in race sense, this is how you can manually ping the line. So if you hit the boat end, that's the right end of the line. If you hit the pin end, that's the left end of the line. There are a few ways that you can ping. You can either ping with your bow if you don't use a bow offset in Vakaros Connect, or if you do use a bow offset in Vakaros Connect, then you ping when your device is on the line. And we always recommend what are called outside pings. So if you're pinging with your device on the line, you sail outside the line and you line up your device and both ends of the start line and hit ping when those are all three lined up. And then you'll see your distance to line from where your bow is, and that's dependent on your magnetic heading. All right, I'm going to mark that one as answered. After setting the auto tax and there's a persistent shift, what is the best way to adjust while racing? Great question. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. There isn't a great way to adjust that while racing right now. Realistically, between races, you can do that update, but while you're racing, you're settled at the angles that you already have. All right. Question from Ed here. When using race sense, is the distance from the compass to the bow already entered? If manual with no race sense, do we enter the distance to the bow, and what is the correct distance? Great question. So when you're sailing in a race sense event, uh, the race committee is actually going to input that bow offset for you. So competitors don't have control over that. The reason for that is just to make sure that nobody's trying anything funny. If you're pinging manually, you do enter the distance to the bow. That correct distance is dependent on your boat. The bow offset on a Melgus 24 and a TP52 is not the same, so you need to go and measure from your device to the bow of your boat. We do have a blog article on our site about pinging that has a few common bow offsets for the Melgus 24 and the J70 and the RS21. If you ever have a question, you're also always welcome to reach out. We have some bow numbers just filed away for RaceSense, so we are able to share those as well. But I would measure if I were you before you're manually pinging. All right. Question here from Richard. Is the bow offset reflected on the screen? So if the bow is over the line, you are, I'm going to say sick there. You're over. So if you ping and you have a bow offset, the distance to line value that you see is from your bow. And that's the same way things are in RaceSense. So if you ever race in RaceSense fleets, I would always encourage you to use a bow offset because you're going to get the same distance to line behavior. I'm going to kind of tie this in with another question we have here. Can you ping off your bow and not worry about a bow offset? Yes, you can. And if you're never planning to use RaceSense, that's totally okay. But if you're ever planning to use RaceSense, you should absolutely use a bow offset because then you're going to get the same behavior of that distance to line number when you're club racing or practicing or whatever it may be, as when you're at a major event using RaceSense. So I really encourage folks to use bow offset. The other reason to do that is that you're going to get significantly more accurate pings doing outside pings with your device on the line than you will just putting your bow on the line at your estimated close hauled angle. So if you're really trying to get great starts, you should use a bow offset. If you're not so worried about it, then I think, it's completely okay to just ping with your bow on the line. All right, that's all that I see in the Q&A, but I did see a few pop in the chat, so I'm going to roll over here. Again, if you're putting questions in the chat, feel free to pop them into the Q&A as well. I see a question from Scott here in the chat that I'm going to answer. I was under the impression that a mounting bracket was included. It is indeed. There is a little, what we call a cradle mount that's included with each Atlas. That's a great bracket for a lot of boats, but some boats, you'll be running a Cunningham down the rig, or, you'll have a number of control lines that you might need to get clear of, or just for the sake of visibility, you might want to mount somewhere else. So I would say you can generally get away, like Scott, it sounds like you're an MC sailor. If you have one of the relatively new MCs where the deck rolls over nicely into the cockpit, I would just mount in the center there. If you have an older boat, then you can either mount on the mast or you can mount on the deck. Those are both options. All right. I do see a for class compliance question. Does Vakaros enter pre-populated data per class rules? Yes, and we always try and get the class to provide to us the features which are available. We never make those decisions. Um, we don't decide what a class allows. We just execute on it. Lisa Marie asking a question. So if you're using a bow offset, you do not use the bow to ping the line. Please clarify. Yes. If you are using a bow offset and pinging manually, you ping when your device is on the line. Um, that's a very important point to keep in mind. And again, we have a great article on our website about pinging. So you are all welcome to take a look at that. Question from Alan here, another Melgus 15 sailor. Great question. When we cross the finish line, will RaceSense give us our finish number or our finish position? We get this one a lot. Without spending too much time on it, uh, not super simple to do that. The way that RaceSense finishes boats, it actually records just your finish time. It doesn't know on your device when other boats are finishing. The race committee tablet actually hears all those finish times and then collates them into a results list. So I think it's likely that at some point we may be able to effectively finish all the boats and then regurgitate those scores once all the boats have finished. But it's not so likely that you're actually going to be able to get your finish position immediately when you cross the line because your boat isn't keeping track of when other boats are finishing. All right. Um, let's find some more questions here. We have a question here on accuracy, clarify DGNSS and RTK set 50. So again, we have great articles on our website about this. Our most recent testing with DGNSS had a set value of 13.9 centimeters. And for RTK, we were at 1 centimeter. So an Atlas 2 in a RaceSense network is going to be running DGNSS. And then eventually when the Atlas Halo RTK is available, that will be running RTK and it'll be slightly more accurate. Not a huge number. All right. Bill Mendel, best practice to check for interference. That's a great question. Magnetic interference is actually super easy to check for, and we have a great app. It's called Physics Toolbox. This is a weird one. Um, it's an app that you would use in like a high school physics class, and it basically uses your phone's suite of sensors to be able to measure a number of things. One of the sensors that's available there is a magnetometer. So I would download that Physics Toolbox app. You can use the magnetometer on your phone, which is generally in the top if you have an iPhone here, and you can put that around where you're mounting your device. And if you see any spikes, then you know that there's some magnetic field around there. So I think that absolutely that's a great thing to check for. And yeah, I would use that Physics Toolbox app. Radio interference is a little harder to check for, like from a carbon plate mounted around the device. Um, but magnetic interference is pretty simple to check for. All right. Susan Mallows, how much is a RaceSense pass? A RaceSense annual pass is 149 US dollars, and a RaceSense monthly pass is 50. Will any charger work from Mike Mastry? So Mike, with chargers, the Atlas charges with a Qi charger. So Qi, that's spelled Qi. That is a standard charging format. It's the same type of charger that'll charge an iPhone. One important note on chargers is that many Qi chargers that are available these days, due to the rise of MagSafe, you guys are probably familiar with that from your phones, where your charger magnets onto the back of your phone, will actually be a magnetic charger. That magnetic charger will actually, over time, throw off the calibration of the Atlas's compass. So be aware, try your best not to use magnetic Qi chargers. Just use the plate chargers that are not magnetic. Um, again, a long time on a magnetic charger will eventually throw off your calibration. So just be careful of that. It always scares me a little bit. I always try and be super careful with my device. Never put your device in the same pocket as your phone. Your phone has strong magnets in it, or as another Atlas. If you have multiple Atlases, don't stack them on top of each other without the cases. Uh, good stuff to be careful for there. All right. Seeing a few more here. I was hoping to mount my Atlas on my Edson wheel pedestal. Would I be better removing the compass and mounting on a starboard disc or a mounting arm like for an iPad? if distance from the stainless? That's actually a great question. So if I were mounting on my wheel pedestal or my binnacle, whatever it may be, um, I think if you did just like a very small clamp mount on top of that that goes up slightly, a couple inches of separation will probably be pretty positive. If you reach out to us, Daryl, I think I have some pictures of people who have mounted in a similar fashion. So feel free to reach out and we can track some of those down for you. We definitely have experience with that sort of thing. All right, 7:57 by my time, so we've got time for just a couple more here. Explain the use of the LEDs. That's a hefty question right there, Arthur. So your LEDs can be used for a wide variety of features, from time to burn, shift tracking, um, start timer. If there's one of those specific functions that you'd like me to explain, feel free to write back to us. Otherwise, I'm going to spend 4 hours talking about the LEDs. Um, Dennis with a question here. Is there a way to access data like heel angle or time to line on the Atlas II from a computer on the boat via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi? That is a great question, Dennis. So one of the things that we are actively building out is increased ability to interface with NMEA 2000 networks. Right now, the Atlas can display a variety of PGNs from NMEA networks, um, but it does not yet actually feed data into that NMEA network. So one of the things that we're working on developing is being able to use the Atlas's sensors as a data source for NMEA networks. So short answer is right now, no, but that's pretty high on the list. Hopefully that answers your question there, Dennis. Question from James. LED display and shifts. How can you set trending shift measurements? The pre-start angles can become old soon. How can the Atlas learn and adapt to changing wind direction trends? That's a great question. One of the things that you can use on the Atlas screen, and let me see if it's present in this render that I put here. Is this actual graph of plus minus, and it'll also show you a 30-second averaged heading if you don't sail reference angles. So if I'm in a place that things are rapidly changing and I just care relative to my recent angles, when you have not sailed reference angles, where you see the 7 on the screen here, that's going to be replaced by your 30-second average heading. And you can use that then as an option to reference, am I up or down relative to my recent sailing? All right. All right, it is closing in on 8 o'clock. I'm going to do one more question. Best review application for post-race on computer. Great question. There are a bunch of good options, and it's becoming easier and easier for people to build post-race applications. It's a really loaded question because each of them does something really well. So in terms of post-race review, it depends what you're looking for. If you want a mobile first platform that's really great, Vantage Sailing is awesome. If you want to do really in-depth analysis and video overview, Nord Analytics is awesome. If you want to do fleet reports, SailViewer is really great. And I'm going to not do a lot of people a lot of justice. There are so many great platforms out there. Again, it really depends on exactly what you're trying to do. If it's just you, if you're looking with the fleet, all that sort of stuff. So definitely shop around. Most of these analytics platforms offers free trials, so feel free to give them a run. All right. All right, with that, I know there are a few more questions here. I told everybody it was going to be a little bit tight. We're just a little bit over an hour tonight. So we are going to start wrapping things up. We will get answers to those that we can by email. If you have any more questions, I will scroll to the end here and pull up our outreach number. So feel free to email us at support@vakaros.com. My email is Doug, D-O-U-G, @vakaros.com. Please reach out anytime. We have staff here who are happy to answer your questions. Whether that's just how to set up your device, how to sail better with RaceSense, how to do this, that, or the other thing. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We are always happy to get back to you on that. And Same thing at events. If you see any of our people, we all try and stay active in the sailing community. So if you see myself, Todd Wilson, Will Hirth, Jake Kyleman, Nicolo Bianchi, any of us out at events, please feel free to come up, ask us a question. We do our best to be available. Sometimes you're pulled a few different directions, but we certainly try. Cool. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope you have a great rest of your night and rest of your sailing season. If you need anything, please reach out to me. Um, and if you ever want to run, if your class or club is running Race Sense, or even if you're not, and you just want to do like a Vakaros specific webinar like this, maybe just for a smaller group, feel free to reach out. We do those pretty frequently as well. So if you think that your yacht club or your organization would benefit from a presentation like this, feel free to send me an email to doug@vakaros.com and we can get something set up. So anyways, thank you all. I'm gonna save all these questions. I'm gonna go ahead and end the webinar and we'll see you all on the water soon.